Good evening and welcome to the Saco City Council meeting for Monday, October 24th, 2022. I call this meeting to order at 6:30. Would like to recognize that all councilors are present with the exception of Mayor Doyle. Deputy Mayor McPhail will be presiding. And would you all please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. Under general tonight, we do have a special recognition. The Extra Mile Day recognition is being presented to Save Our Shores, SOS Saco. Whereas Saco is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when its individuals, citizens, collectively go the extra mile in personal effect, volunteerism, and service. And whereas the City of Saco is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas Saco is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within its community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members of their community. And whereas Saco acknowledges the mission of Extra Mile America to create 500 extra mile cities in America and is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2022. Now, therefore, William Doyle, the Mayor of Saco, Maine, do hereby proclaim that November 1st, 2022 was Extra Mile Day. I urge each volunteer and individual in the community to take time to not only go the extra mile in his or her own life, but to also acknowledge all of those who are inspirational in their effort and commitment to make the organizations, families, community, country, or world a better place. And Mayor Doyle will be signing this proclamation for you. SOS Saco Bay has gone the extra mile and has been chosen as Saco's Extra Mile Heroes of 2022. Save Our Shores, SOS Saco Bay, is made up of volunteers who are committed to protecting our community's shoreline. Saco Bay's shoreline has been in peril for years, with erosion causing multiple homes to be lost to the ocean, as well as major infrastructure damage. In the past few years, SOS Saco Bay has brought together elected officials from all levels of government to fight for this cause. They have been crucial in educating the public about these issues, setting up symposiums and conferences that have included many subject matter experts and elected officials. The group demands that changes be made to better one of the most valuable natural resources in our community. With their help, progress has been made in forming a plan for remediation. The communities of Saco Bay are grateful for your underlying dedication to our shores. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to take a moment to introduce our newest department head to the council and those joining us this evening. Tracy Desjardins recently last week started as our new Economic Development Director. Tracy is here with us tonight. She comes to us from the city of Gardner, where she held the Economic Development Director position there, and previously was in the cities of Waterville, Auburn, and the town of Lisbon. So Tracy, if you want to just say hello, that'd be great, and welcome.
Good evening. As Brian said, my name is Tracy Desjardins, and I am very happy to be here in Saco. We've already been getting the ball rolling on things, and for any questions that you may have for me, feel free to reach out. But I'm very excited and looking forward to my tenure here.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay, that concludes the general portion of the agenda. Next, we have committee correspondence to council. Are there any committee correspondence to council? Councilor Berman?
Thank you. The Conservation Commission met last week but was unable to meet quorum for lack of attendance. They are down several members, and so I'd like to remind the public that you can apply for city commissions on the city website. If you're interested in a conservation commission, I would encourage you to put an application in. They also wanted to have me let the council know that they are looking into cluster developments, or they're also called conservation developments, and are considering making suggestions for zoning amendments to allow such developments in our city.
Thank you. Do we have any other committee correspondence to council? Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. My position on the board of the Biddeford-Saco Chamber, we are holding next Thursday, the 3rd, 2 p.m., a workforce development group. So if anybody's related to, has individuals who are job seeking, not the seekers, but organizations related to them, or employers themselves that want to participate in initially a roundtable, but possibly ongoing meeting. It's being redeveloped prior to COVID. We had it, but we're bringing it back. So again, it's to meet our workforce needs. Please feel free to reach out to me, marcher@sacomaine.org, if you're interested in attending. Again, it's open to organizations that have job seekers or the employers themselves. So to help with the employment crisis that we have, a lot of open positions, not enough people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, not seeing any hands raised. Move on to public comment. We have one person signed up. Kathleen DeZazio. Please remember to state your name, address, and 3 minutes for the comment.
My name is Kathleen Giaggio, and I live at 15 Plymouth Drive in Saco. If you remember, late last fall, I contacted you about 6 rights-of-way to the beach off Seaside Avenue by Long Pond that were not being maintained by the city and, in fact, were being encroached by the abutters. When I brought this to your attention, you actioned city staff to handle this. What I thought that meant was to make sure that these rights-of-way were preserved. I have sent several messages since then, but have never received an adequate response, and after a while did not even receive any response. I sent a message similar to this one last week asking to be included in the council packet. That did not happen. When I spoke to Mr. Berman last week, he was suggesting that the rights-of-way be eliminated if the landowners would allow the public to access their private beach. He then clarified his position in an email to me that stated, just to be clear, while I believe no progress has been made on the right-of-ways, my idea for how to move forward were mine alone and did not represent any official city position. As I think I explained, we have not yet had a meeting to follow up on the most recent conversations with the homeowners. Moreover, council has taken no action that would reflect a formal city policy. I personally do not think this is an equitable compromise for the residents of Saco. If there's no access to the private beach, how is the public going to use it? Second, the city is supposed to be entering into negotiations with the Army Corps of Engineers to remediate the erosion of the beach. This should not be done on private land. When I was on the Shoreline Commission, the ACO told us that the city needed to get public access from these landowners or no remediation would happen. I believe that is still true today. Why should individual property owners have the ability to deny access to the public while the public is maintaining their property? It defies logic. What is the point of Saco advocating for the purchase of a dredge if the beach is privately owned? Please also note that I am fortunate enough to live walking distance to Bayview Beach, so these rights-of-way are not something I will probably use. It is well past time for this to be settled for the benefit of all the Saco residents, not just the lucky few able to afford oceanfront property. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. We have no one else signed up. Is there anybody in the audience wishing to speak?
Hi, Kevin Roach, 18 Vines Road, and also president of SOS Saco Bay with Vice President here, David Plavin. First off, thank you to Mayor Doyle, but to everyone here for our award. Appreciate it, but I mean, couldn't do anything without, first of all, our city council's support, mayor's support, and other staff and government and the rest of the communities that have helped us. I did want to use this time just to update you. Actually, as most of you know, that we did get the dredge approved for purchase by the York County government last Wednesday, and now the real work begins to get ready for it. I don't think we're going to hit next dredge season, which is next November, but we'll keep you posted. We are going to kind of form a working group of updates, so we would certainly share any updates we are getting. Hopefully government is talking to each other as well. And now and also the next step here is to find out when the Army Corps is coming back to you guys with the PPA. The dredge will help supplement, but it's not part of the Army Corps project itself. So make sure that there are things converging, but they're still going to remain in separate lanes. But the dredge will certainly help. But the PPA, Project Partnership Agreement, hopefully comes in by the end of the year, but certainly be resolved and known well before, hopefully, the start of the summer. All right, thank you very much, and look forward to keep working with you. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other members of the audience? Please approach.
Jane Karen, 264 Lincoln Street in Saco. And I wanted to share my ideas on action item C, the selling of the property at 9 Pearl Street in Camp Ellis. And I'm requesting at this time that the council consider all options except number 2. I think it's very important that we retain this property, especially at this time when things are changing on the shoreline. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? Not seeing anybody wishing to be addressed. Move on to the approval of minutes for October 17th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Motion by Counselor Hatch. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. Next on the agenda, we have consent items. We have one consent item, notice of election for the general and referendum election, November 8th, 2022. Is there any discussion regarding the consent item? Not seeing any hands raised. Is there a motion to approve the consent item?
So moved.
Motion made by Counselor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Purdy. Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Consent item motion passes 6-0. That moves us to action items. First action item on the agenda, action item A, budget update, fiscal year 23, quarter 1, and that will be presented by Director Salas.
Thank you. Good evening. The narrative that I'm going to present, as well as all of the numbers, are available in the council packet, which is posted on the city's website. The city has closed the first quarter fiscal year 2023 in a strong position. Although expenses were 1% ahead of forecast, revenues were also 5% ahead of forecast. The city has a net income year-to-date of $9.4 million, and the unassigned fund balance is currently estimated at $20.6 million, or 31.08% of the adopted budget. This number will go down as we work through the next couple of months of expenses between tax bill due dates. On the expense side, expenses, like I mentioned, were 1%, or 122,876 ahead of forecast. This was primarily driven by bond payments, which were paid in September prior to the actual due date of October 1st. County tax, finance, fire and ambulance, fringe benefits, human resources, insurance, parks and rec, school budget, and transfers are all on target because they are within 5% of forecast. Other departments I will detail now. The assessing department is 20% behind forecast. The department has gone through a restructure, and the underspend currently is primarily driven by contracted services, which is how we funded the shared assessor position previously with Biddeford. The department is looking at what funds are available for the department to make use of maybe some contracted services for date updates. Capital projects is 33% ahead of forecast. Like I mentioned, bonds were paid in September, but not due until October. City administration, 18% behind forecast. Dues and memberships and software fees typically budgeted upfront at the start of the year, but expended through the year, so that's driving most of that. City clerk is 40% behind forecast. General assistance continues to be slow. Seasonal wages for election workers are tracking a little behind forecast, but of course will pick up as we are now engaged in election season, as of course we can see on the side. Code enforcement, 12% behind forecast. There has been a little turnover in staff, so that's giving us some savings on the base pay. Communications is 15% behind forecast. We typically budget software fees up front, but those fees are paid through the year. Contingency is 48% behind forecast. The senior tax assistant program came in at $49,441 versus total budget of $150,000. Participation was actually higher than last year, but the amount was a 100% match to the property tax fairness credit rather than the 2 times match council approved last year. So that's why the absolute number is lower. Participation, of course, is lower than the full budgeted amount. Council is 56% behind forecast. Miscellaneous expenses, supplies, and travel training are behind forecast year to date. Grants and reimbursements. The city did have $3,116 in grant-funded expenses to date. A revenue payment for the York County vaccine program was posted to an expense account in error, so the actual number in the report is a little bit lower. This has been fixed in the ERP, but there's a 24-hour delay, and we want to get this packet out to everyone on time. So that number will be corrected for the Q2 update. Information technology, 30% behind forecast. Similar to communications, a big portion of their budget is software fees. We tend to budget those in the first month of the year, but some of the renewals are through the year. Planning is 25% behind forecast. The planning department does have some significant funds budgeted for contracted studies and other services to progress the comp plan and some other projects through the year, so I'm sure they'll be working to get those in action. The police department is 27% behind forecast. The big piece in this budget is the RMS CAD software migration project. That's been started, but no expenses have been booked just yet. There are also a couple openings in the police department, and PSAP contracted costs have not yet been billed. Public Works Department, 7% ahead of forecast. We did have an old invoice for solid waste curbside that was paid in fiscal year 2023 after we closed the books on 2022, so that's pushing the line a bit. And the streetlight conversion process has come in a little over budget, so we're having to fund that out of streetlights contracted services. And the solicitor, good news here, 17% behind forecast. Last couple of years we've been over. It looks like pressure on this line has eased up for the current fiscal year. Any questions on expenses?
Do we have any questions for Director Salas at this time? Nope, not seeing any.
All right, so revenues. Revenues were 5% or $1.5 million ahead of forecast through Q1 of fiscal year 2023. This was driven primarily by real and personal property taxes, followed by excise revenues, state assistance, and some good news, interest earnings. Property taxes, communications, and fire and ambulance transfer revenues were within 5% of forecast, so they are considered on target, and we'll talk through the rest of those expense lines. Building rentals, 19% below forecast. There is a piece of city property that was previously being rented. It's no longer earning rental income as budgeted, so we'll probably be light on that line through the year. Capital revenue, there's just a small amount of capital revenue that was transferred to the general fund as part of the 2023 budgeting process. It was premium paid on the 2020 refunding of the fire station and trails bonds. That's been transferred to the general fund to offset those bonded interest costs. City clerk revenues, 34% ahead of forecast. On May 7th, 2022, LD 910, an act to amend general assistance laws governing reimbursement, became public law, 22 Chapter 734. It allocates $10 million from Maine's Liquor Fund to the Department of Health and Human Services. The purpose here is to supplement unanticipated fiscal and operational costs to the General Assistance Program related to COVID-19 and to offset loss of revenues from the federal government, as the federal government has unwound most of their COVID-19 support. Saco was allocated $34,604.15 from this legislation. Code enforcement revenues are 23% behind forecast. This line is heavily dependent on significant developments. The last couple of years, we've had some big developments come in that have driven those revenue numbers. In conversation with the department, seems like that's slowing a bit. So we'll have to see how revenues continue through the year. We pulled back on how much revenues we were budgeting for the department, and we may pull back further as we enter into the budgeting process for next year. Finance revenues, 10% behind forecast. Lien interest rates were capped at 4% by the state for this budget process. The lien interest amounts for FY 2023 were not adjusted down to reflect this lower amount, so we'll kind of keep an eye on that also for 2024. Fire ambulance revenues. So the transfer to the general fund from the ambulance fund is on target because we budget a particular amount of transfer revenues. But I do want to update the council that the ambulance fund itself is having one of the best quarters in quite some time. Right now, the fund is on track to exceed $1 million for the first time in ambulance revenues. So Director Mathern and I are really excited to have, I think, cracked the code on ambulance revenues in partnership with both Quick Med Claims, who does our billing, and LifeQuest, which is our collections partner. So we'll continue to keep council updated on that. That does ensure available funding to the Fire and Ambulance Department for capital improvements as needed. Grants and reimbursements, $3,116 in revenue to date. Interest earnings, another piece of good news, we have $129,760 to date, well ahead of the full year total forecast of $50,000. Of course, as many of you may be aware, the federal interest rate has gone up significantly, faster than anticipated, even for those in the financial sector. The repurchase market has finally started to recover in line with these interest rate hikes. Additionally, the city has elected Morgan Stanley as its investment advisor. We'll be hearing a little bit more about that new program, I think, at an upcoming council meeting. We will be investing surplus cash in treasuries, which are currently earning rates as high as 4%. This revenue line is anticipated to be as high as $500,000 for fiscal year 2023, which will help offset use of fund balance that was budgeted for this fiscal year. Recreation revenues are 20% ahead of forecast. Department revenues are trending higher as a full program of community activities has been rolled out, and participation is back to normal levels. Planning revenues is 76% ahead of forecast. This is an ongoing project to really try and nail down the best process for managing cost recovery, escrow, and revenues. We have a new method that we're rolling out that I think is going to assist in tracking and reporting on this. Police revenues are 65% behind forecast. We did budget for the TA, community policing, and air for 2023, so I have noted that that will need to come out for the 24 budget as TA is managing their security in-house now. Public Works revenues are 19% ahead of forecast. Public Works is largely excise, so we levy excise tax on cars, in essence, to pay for the cost of road maintenance. This is driven by higher than budgeted excise revenues, which in turn is likely driven by higher MSRP on vehicles. Inflation and other supply chain restrictions have led to higher prices on vehicles, and that flows into the excise line. State assistance is 7% ahead of forecast. So state revenue sharing is higher than forecasted due to higher revenues at the state level. So that's really good news, especially as we're looking at the new senior tax stabilization program coming in. We are heavily dependent on the state adhering to its promise to fully fund that offset to municipalities to avoid budget shortfalls in the coming years. Unallocated, this is a placeholder account. Currently, we're using it to flush through outstanding bills deemed uncollectible by the finance director, so that's why that revenue number is in the negative right now. And then unassigned fund balance, of course, this placeholder line is used to balance the budget for use of fund balance. Are there any questions?
Counselor Hatch?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor McPhail. Just a couple of positive comments. On the revenue side, I'm happy to see that swing in the ambulance fund. So a couple of issues that I brought up in the past, you took action on, and it's paying dividends, so thank you for that. I'm also pleased with the investment returns. Folks like me who have been through, I've been through 3 cycles already, waiting for my 4th. If you're borrowing money, it seems like it's expensive, but it's actually at a historical norm. And these rates of return on deposits are also in line with historical norms. So if we can keep some stability here in the market, this is going to be a really beneficial line item for the city. So I'm glad we have credible investment advisory services, and I'm certain that they'll make sure that we take our idle cash and get a good return on it. So kudos on both of those.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Oh, go ahead.
So I had one more update. There was some interest from council in the status of the ARPA funding from the federal government. So that's the third sort of numerical report in this section of the packet. The city did receive $2,111,791. There's a little extra that got transferred to the city in the end. We have only expended $16,965 of that money, so there's a little bit of coverage for administrative costs, essentially offsetting the salary of the finance department leadership, as well as some encumbrances for the multi-year computer rollout, which our IT department is actively planning for, and ambulance equipment from the fire and ambulance department. So not a lot of activity on this fund as of yet, but we are keeping a close eye on it. And of course, only did really budget $1.2 million of the total receipt amount for fiscal year 2023. There were some designated funds for certain projects in the second year of ARPA, but that will be officially approved by council as we move into the fiscal year 2024 budget process. Any questions on ARPA? Great.
Any questions? Nope.
That's all I had for you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Great.
that. Okay, next on the agenda, we have action item B, final reading, budget amendment number 2, Fire Department HVAC Air Handling Unit. And that is with Councilor Purdy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Over the past year, several steps have been taken to address the HVAC system mold issues at the fire station. The problem has been rectified, but the final most important step is prevention. To prevent this from occurring again, the fresh air being brought into the building needs to be conditioned first. This will require a rooftop unit that with full retrofit and installation will cost approximately $110,000. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the second and final reading of Budget Amendment Number 2, FY 2023. I move to approve the order.
Second.
Motion has been made by Counselor Purdy, second with Counselor Johnston. Is there any discussion or questions? Okay, not seeing any. Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. That leads us to action item C, first reading, Chapter 81, request to purchase city-owned property of 9 Pearl Ave. The counselor resource has been changed from Counselor Purdy to Counselor Berman.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Jack Hughes, owner of the property located at 7 Pearl Ave, Lot 37 of Tax Map 1, submitted a request for the Planning Board and City Council to consider selling the neighboring parcel to the east, 9 Pearl Ave, Lot 36 of Tax Map 1, to him, so he can maintain the areas abutting his property and expand a deck. 9 Pearl Ave contains a section of seawall and public beach areas. The Planning Board voted 5-1 to forward a negative recommendation to City Council during their September meeting. The Planning Board's negative recommendation is based on advice received from the City Solicitor and Public Works Director, who state that the subject property may be needed by the City and Army Corps of Engineers for future projects. Planning staff conclude that City Council has several options to consider. 1. Vote to deny the request and retain ownership of 9 Pearl Avenue. Vote to sell that portion of 9 Pearl Avenue that is necessary for Mr. Hughes to achieve his objectives. This would generally comprise those areas that are above or landward of the seawall. 3rd, vote to deny the request, retain public ownership of 9 Pearl Ave, and advise Mr. Hughes to apply for a contract zone agreement by which the council may authorize use or development of his property which does not comply with zoning standards. Or 4, vote to deny the request, retain public ownership of 9 Pearl Ave, and advise planning staff and the planning board to devise provisions for administrative variances in Saco's zoning ordinance. Such variances would enable property owners to seek limited relief from specific zoning standards, provided criteria related to the public health and safety and minimizing impacts on neighboring areas are met. I move to approve the first reading and to schedule a public hearing for November 7th, 2022 for the Chapter 81 request to sell the city-owned property identified as Tax Map 1, Lot 36.
Motion's been made by Counselor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Gunn. Any discussion? Counselor Archer?
Yes, based on my discussion last week, it's probably not prudent to sell this property at this time. Again, considering in the future would be great. But we've had a planning board say, don't do it. We've had city staff say, don't do that. And they've done this twice, because this is the second time it's come to us. And we have a recent attorney's decision, which I won't go into details, suggesting the same. So unfortunately, with this, and at this time, it's not a good fit. I'm going to be voting no.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Counselor Berman?
Yeah, thank you. I do worry there's been a little confusion, and I think that's best illustrated by option number 2 in the background. While the introduction, and I think what the planning board considered, was to sell the entirety of the 9 Pearl Avenue property, which is Lot 36 on Maps 1, I think Mr. Hughes only wishes to purchase the parcel of land between his house and the seawall. It's a relatively small parcel. He maintains it today. If you looked at it, it looks contiguous with his yard. And as we discussed at the last meeting, the public doesn't have access to that except for by climbing the seawall and or crossing Mr. Hughes's property already. It's not contiguous with the road or any other rights of way. And I think much of the confusion is that the city would still have access to the public parts of the seawall, the public parts of the beach. He just wishes to purchase the land, again, landward of the seawall. So I would advocate for option number 2, and I think it meets most people's needs in this case.
Any other discussion? Counselor Purdy?
Thank you. I'm missing the vital piece of information for me is my questions last week were, was it a a setback issue or a lot coverage issue, and I guess what I'd like to know is how much more land does he need to build the deck or expand his deck? And would the land, sorry, the term's escaping me, the land up to the seawall, cover, if it's a lot coverage problem, would that small strip up to the seawall give him enough land to expand his deck? I'm going to vote to forward this to a public hearing simply because I want to get more information. I don't know if that's information we need from code enforcement or from the planning department, but
We do have City Planner Garnham, if you would like to ask him. Is that something you have?
Good evening.
Information?
So there were two questions there, and the answer to the first one is I believe it is both a lot coverage and setback issue. My understanding is that the current condition of the site is that the buildable footprint is more or less fully occupied. I do not, to answer your second question, I am not privy to what Mr. Hughes's plans are for expanding his deck. I think he may be waiting to see how much land he might have in the future before he starts drawing up plans.
thank you. Like I said, I'll vote to forward it to the public hearing, but if we could get some input from code enforcement as to what the actual numbers are before.
I'm not sure they'll have it either, Councilor Purdy, but we can ask.
Yep, thank you.
Counselor Hatch?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Jason, I just want to confirm for my own benefit, the planning board's negative recommendation, it only considered, which I guess is option one of this, that we weren't going to sell a portion of the property, it was all or nothing?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The planning board did consider, Mr. Hughes's request did include the question of selling part or all of the property, and the real reason I think they voted to forward a negative recommendation is that the public need is at this moment so very unknown. None of us had any factual information that we could give to the planning board that said that the city or the Army Corps of Engineers needs X, Y, or Z. We simply don't know.
Thank you.
So just to clarify on that, those options were not presented to the planning board. They came to us after the discussion at last meeting.
The planning board did consider partial sale of a part of the property. That was part of Mr. Hughes's request.
Any other questions? Okay, we will take a roll call vote, and just remember that we are, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I said my bit about this last week. I don't think this is in the best interest of the city to be selling any parcels down there at this time. But I am interested. We received an email earlier today, I believe from Councilor Berman, questions about, I guess legal questions. And so from my position, I am interested to the city administrator of having the city solicitor answer those questions. So, thank you.
City Administrator Kenworth, can you get with Solicitor Murphy to, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, not seeing any. Remember, we are just voting on to move this forward to public hearing. Councilor Archer.
No.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
No.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
Okay, there is a tie with a 3-3 that will determine a vote by Deputy Mayor. To move this forward for public hearing, I will vote yes. Motion passes 4-3. Okay, that concludes the action items. That brings us to item number 10, new business. We do have a presentation on the Community Satisfaction Survey. It's a presentation of the results, and Director Roy. I know.
Thank you. Before introducing our guest, I'd like to take a moment first just to thank our community members who participated in this survey. We appreciate your investment of your time. We appreciate that you took the time to complete it. I'd also like to acknowledge the council and staff support with developing the survey and promoting the completion of it. And I'd also like to thank Andrew Dickinson, the digital media manager for the city, for all of his work preparing and promoting the survey. I think he did a really great job with that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Brooke Mitchell from the Center of Research and Public Policy. It's a New England-based research firm, and they assisted us with this project. It's been a pleasure to work with Brooke, and we're happy to have her here tonight to present the results.
Pressed a few buttons on the way over. Okay. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Brooke Mitchell. I am with the Center for Research and Public Policy. We are a market and social research firm that we've been around for over 40 years. So we are very pleased to be working with the City of Saco for this project, Community Satisfaction Survey, conducted just recent months. We do work from market, social research, that's not my screen. And we offer wide array of methodologies when we approach projects. We work with private corporations, municipalities such as yourself, all across the 50 United States and other countries as well. So this survey for the City of Saco was conducted to collect resident and business owner manager input regarding satisfaction with several aspects of life in the City of Saco. So the city included areas such as quality of life in Saco, experiences in Saco, community perceptions, awareness and satisfaction of city government services and departments, opinions on community development, communication preferences, and we collected demographics as well. So before going into the results, I just wanted to touch into the methodology that we employed for this specific project. We created a survey instrument using the input from the City of Saco administration. We programmed an online survey. We used an every door direct mailer, which contained the online survey link that was distributed along postal routes throughout the City of Saco, which included over 10,000 residences, P.O. boxes, and businesses in Saco through the post office. So they were encouraged to visit the online link and complete the survey. The survey link was also posted on various city websites, social media pages. I believe there was press releases as well. Paper versions were also available at 4 locations within the city, including City Hall, Age-Friendly Saco, Saco Scoop, and the library. So using this methodology, we received 914 online responses, 17 hard copy responses among the residents and business owners or managers for a total combined of 931 responses. All surveys were completed between August 29th and September 19th. So Just to give you perspective, a sample of this size would create an associated margin of error of about 3.12% at a 95% confidence interval. So I just want to go off that topic for 1 second, just to give perspective as to other surveys that we conduct in various methodologies. When we approach municipalities using other methodologies such as phone surveys, we're only looking to receive 300 to 400 completions in surveys. When we approach a statewide survey, we will ask for about a 600 sample survey. When we conduct our national polls with our college polling institutes, we ask for about 1,000 to 1,200 completes when we conduct our surveys. So I just want to give you some perspective as to what 931 responses represents for this survey methodology. So to get into the summary of findings, this will take you essentially through the report that we submitted. So we're going to go through it. I'm going to go through it with you. I know that I think you were aware of the results this morning, so this might be repetitive, but I'll join you this time. So when we reported the results to the survey, it was important to the city to ask business owners and managers questions of these surveys as well. So when one of the screening questions, we asked, are you a resident, 18 years of age or older? Do you own or manage a business located in Saco, but you live in a different town? Or both, yes, I am a resident and I am a business owner or manager in Saco. So when we go through the report, there are 2 columns, one that represents residents and one that represents businesses. The residents are those that responded to that first row, yes, resident, 18 years of age or older, which has an associated complete number of 850 responses, as well as that third row of 70 responses. So those together create 920 responses in the residents column. For businesses, we included the second row of 11 responses of folks that do own or manage a business located in Saco but live in a different town, as well as the third column that they are also a business owner that is a resident. So the business column reports on 81 responses throughout the survey. Okay, going through the results. Impressively, 97% of resident responded indicated their quality of life within Saco was very good or good. Similarly, 95.1% of business owners reported the same findings. We find that municipalities or cities, towns of your location, typically that percentage will go down in a more urban area in the 80s, but your town or city that represents more rural, suburban areas fall into the 90% range. So you fall in the upper scope of that. So we provided a few statements about life in Saco, and we asked to respond to each as very good, good, poor, or very poor. And we asked Saco as a place to live. Is it good, or very good, good, poor, or very poor? 97.3% said Saco was very good or good as a place to live. Similarly, businesses down to as a place to raise children was 95.6%. As a place to work, it goes down a little bit to 78.9%. Businesses reporting slightly higher at 83.6%. Similarly, as a place to own a business, similar for businesses at 83%. And then lastly, declining order as a place to retire. About 3/4 of respondents or residents said that Saco as a place to retire was very good or good. So we wanted to know a little bit about the history of some of the residents and business owners, managers. We asked, why did you choose Saco, or why have you remained in Saco? This was a multiple response question. Location was at the top of that list, followed by neighborhood, city appearance, and then in declining order, work opportunities, city property tax rates, and then at the bottom, we have listed a few verbatim open-end response, or other responses as well. And other responses that weren't included on our list included responses like spent summers up here, so before moving, maybe they can't afford to move, that's why they've remained in Saco. There's an active art community here, that's why they're here, the population size. So those were other responses that were included that folks added into this list. So on experiences in Saco, we asked 2 open-ended response questions. The first one being, would you care to describe some of the reasons that you enjoy Saco as a resident or as a business owner or a manager? I know, I believe some of the city team took a gander at the results, depending on the font size you use. They are a minimum of 75 pages for this question and the next question, so it's some good long reading, but we encourage you to go through some of those open-ended responses. We've taken the liberty of coding them to just give you a gist of what's included in all those open-ended respondents, and some of them are paragraphs long with multiple mentions. So this is a declining order list of some of the most frequent responses to the less frequent responses. So some of the more frequent responses being coastal living near the beach, sense of community, friendly character, general location, general convenience, proximity to other cities, towns, all the way down to nice library, affordable, historic background of city and buildings, and the public works department. Alternatively, we asked what were respondents most concerned about as a resident or business owner and manager were. So at the top of the list of mentions, taxes for those with fixed incomes were concerned, traffic, congestion, speeding, school concerns, pace of development, growth, home affordability, cost of home. And the list continues on down to the bottom. You know, the library might need an update, communication, too many banks, and accessibility concerns too. So all of these are just a very, very condensed list, snapshot of what is in those open-end responses and what you will find. And they are very interesting to read, so we do encourage folks to go through those. Community perceptions. We provided several community perception statements. We asked how strongly respondents agreed with or disagreed with these statements. So at the top of the list, both residents and businesses strongly or somewhat agreed with statements such as, I feel safe within the Saco community. One below that being members of the Saco community care about each other. Below that being, I expect to be a part of the Saco community for a long time. And you'll notice at the top grouping of those responses seem to be about the culture of the city. They're hopeful, it's safe, it's caring. Those are all kind of culture-based experience community perception statements, down to, you know, there's less agreement with the city of Saco tax dollars are spent wisely. I have personal influence over what what the Saco community is like. And then towards the bottom, the city of Saco is affordable to live in, with 41.4% strongly or somewhat agreeing with that statement for residents, businesses less so at 35%, saying they strongly or somewhat agree with that statement. And in this, we removed unsure, not applicable responses for this data, as if they weren't sure of it, it makes sense to remove them from the data. So on city government, we wanted to know how familiar is the community with the Saco government. Business owners and managers had a stronger familiarity with the city of Saco government, with 77.8% indicating they're very or somewhat familiar with the government, and then residents, 66.4% indicating they're very or somewhat familiar with the city of Saco government. So before we dove into individual services or departments that are provided by the city of Saco government, we wanted to know overall, what is your satisfaction with the city of Saco government? You'll see that 77.3% of residents reported to be very or somewhat satisfied. Less than 3/4 of business owners at 70.4% indicated that they were very or somewhat satisfied. And something like this question, we feel that keeping an unsure, don't know response in the percentages, because it's interesting to know that some folks are just unsure how to answer that question. They are not familiar with the city of Saco government. They don't know how to respond. So when you remove, from at least the residents, that 6.3 from the data, satisfaction raises to 82.3%, very or somewhat satisfied with the government. So that changes the number slightly. And diving into the city departments and services, we asked satisfaction of several different aspects of the city. We asked how satisfied, so you had very, somewhat satisfied, somewhat dissatisfied, and not at all satisfied as responses. Here, we've also removed those that had no opinion or have not used these services at all. So they were removed from the data to represent these numbers. So at the top of the list, you'll find satisfaction is extremely high for the fire ambulance services for both residents and businesses. Below that, you have the city clerk, both being just about 92% satisfaction that are very or somewhat satisfied. Down the list, you have wastewater treatment services, finance department, parks and recreation, public safety, all the way down to traffic enforcement, economic development, and planning, significantly lower than some of those satisfaction numbers. And planning department, there's a little less satisfaction among business owners and managers versus residences. On community development, we listed several aspects of the city, and we wanted to know whether residents or business owners thought there were too few, just the right amount, or too many of each of these services. And we translate community need to be those reporting that there are too few of these aspects of the city. So again, unsure responses were removed from the data. And towards the top of the list, there is a reported need of restaurants, even more so among businesses. So you have 64.8% of residents stating there are too few restaurants, and business owners, managers reporting 78.5% stating too few. So you go down the list in declining order, all the way down to grocery stores, vacation rentals, banking. Only 1.8% feel that there are too few banks in this city. Vacation rentals, just above that, 11.5% of residents feel there's too few. But it jumps up for businesses, business owners or managers. They feel that about 20% feel that there's too few. So there's a slight difference there as well. So on communication from the city. So this is actually unique in some of our findings. Some cities or towns that we work with don't ask satisfaction with the level of communication. They just go straight to asking, how have we been reaching you? How do you prefer to be reached? So going back into our database, there's not a whole lot of folks, a lot of cities that ask, what is your actual satisfaction with this? So, and that just occurred to us even going back into our archives. And learning a little more about that. So you have 66.7 suggesting they're very or somewhat satisfied with the level of communication from the city. Again, we included the unsure, don't know, but when you remove the unsure and don't know, that satisfaction jumps up to 71.5%. And just slightly fewer business owners, managers, 56.8, were very or somewhat satisfied. And then further, we did a little research poking around into surveys conducted other surrounding towns from Saco, and it's slightly higher than some, like I think Scarsborough, one of their recent surveys, I think 58.5% said that they were satisfied, or the effectiveness of the town communication with the community was a positive. So that's you're in good company and in good numbers, being just north of something of similar town than you. And so we asked, despite where you go for information from the city, where do you prefer to be to receive communication? So your top three being monthly email newsletter, official city website, and Facebook were high for both residents and business owners. We know you can't always do everything at once, so this helps give you a little bit of a prioritized list of where to focus. There were some other responses as well where there were other suggestions about how they might you might communicate. I think there was like weekly newsletters, more frequency, things like that. And at the end of the survey, we provided an opportunity, an open-ended response question for folks to just write down any more notes about things that weren't included in the survey that they wanted to convey to the city of Saco. They were, as you can imagine, all over the place, large range of responses, but so it's not exactly codable and put it into one pretty box, but we do recommend that you go through those as well. There's a lot of great input in there about things that they may have been missed or things they felt they didn't get across. So it was a great opportunity for folks to convey what they wanted to convey. And something I might not pull up unless there are questions about it regarding the results. So we did provide the city cross-tabulations of demographics for many of these questions. So we were able to provide male versus female age brackets. I think there were several other demographics that I could pull it up if that's something that we'd want to cover, but you can spend hours with those numbers. That's one of our favorite parts of this job, is to really see comparisons between different demographics versus the questions. So we recommend that you go through those as well. Are there any questions and follow-up that I might be able to answer?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councilor Archer?
Yes, thank you. My question is, do you replicate this study with other, like this type, the questions, everything that you use with other communities, so that I could research those communities so I can compare their results to ours, recognizing it may not be 100% identical?
Sure. So there are, 2 to 3 large corporations that conduct these types of surveys, and they do not change the survey based on the community. One thing that we did discuss during the interview process about the reasons that why we don't particularly do that is because every community is different. Quality of life questions, things like that, those can be compared across the board. That's a very typical question to ask. When you set out to do this, you have to weigh your options about if you want to just be compared to communities that might not be similar to yours, and it's hard to put yourself in comparison to that. So we work with groups that do want to create unique questions based on what their needs and their community wants to convey to the city or town.
Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm particularly interested right now in kind of around page 16 and 17, the satisfaction with Saco government numbers. And what I'm noticing is that 77-ish% of people reported that they're satisfied with Saco government. But when you get down into some particular things like traffic enforcement management, economic development, and planning, those numbers fall down into the low 50s. And I'm wondering about that discrepancy with 77% of people being overall satisfied, but then these pockets where there seems to be some more dissatisfaction. And is it possible that those issues aren't of particular importance to people? They're not weighing them very heavily? Or how do you think about those numbers where people are pretty satisfied overall, but then there are areas where they're expressing some dissatisfaction and kind of that discrepancy?
Sure, and this is where we, we remove those that there are, if we were to go into the numbers on actually how many responses were for some of these individual questions, and I can go through and give you the specific number of responses, maybe there were some of these departments and services that maybe 50% of them couldn't answer. So if you go through, we provided a composite of numbers, you'll be able to see first off the number of people that were able to report their satisfaction, whether satisfied or dissatisfied. That will give you some information about who was able to answer the questions and who wasn't able to answer the question. And that's why we also try to give some explanation as to some of these services and departments as specific as we can, so that one person's not thinking of one thing when they're thinking of the other, while another person's thinking of a different type of service. So I encourage you to go through the composite, which just has the number of people who answered that specific question, and that might give you some insight.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Councilor Hatch?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I haven't had a chance to read this thoroughly. I just got it this afternoon, but a couple of issues came to mind as I was perusing through the document. Ironically, page 13 lists the top 5 issues or problems facing Saco, and it seems to be a very similar outline to the feedback that I provided the council about a month ago in that moratorium effort coming from our own city staff, as well as comments that we've heard from the public. So I found that kind of interesting. And I also, if you follow that train of thought, of course, number 4 was pace of development. When you look at the reasons for choosing Saco, which is on page 11, neighborhood and city appearance is ranked very, very high. And of course, we all know, whether we want to believe it or not, a fast-paced growth, particularly if it's uncontrolled, will certainly have an impact on the culture that you described earlier. And lastly, another observation on page 10, the second item, Saco is a place to raise children, which I firmly believe. I raise my own kids here. We want to remember this, and maybe this is more of a message to the planning board, but we want to be a little wary of developers who come to town and try to convince us that their large-scale developments will not produce a large number of children, which is counterintuitive to this. I believe that Saco does in fact appeal to families who want to raise children, and it smacks in the face of some of the comments that we are likely to hear as this development moves forward. Nice report. I got to spend a little bit more time with it, but those are my initial observations.
Any other questions at this time, or comments? Okay, as we go through this, if you come up with any questions or comments that you would like to relay, you can email Director Roy. She will then be able to pass on the information to work for us and get replies and responses back. So if you come up with anything, please email her. Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, that now brings us to item 11, administrative update.
Thank you. A couple of quick updates. First, hybrid meetings. Stone Mountain Sound, our audio and visual contractor for work in this auditorium, has equipment on order to complete the hybrid meeting technology conversion Funded as far as in the FY23 budget process, the Communications Department is also partnering with IT, who is managing installation of associated network upgrades. We'll keep you updated as work is completed later this fall, following the completion of absentee voting in the auditorium. Once this work is complete, the council will be ready if and when hybrid council meetings are needed or desired. Our community satisfaction survey, as you just heard, we will publish the Community Satisfaction Survey report tomorrow, October 25th, on our website at sacomaine.org/community survey for all citizens who would like to take a deeper look at it. We truly appreciate the community's participation and input in this initiative. Before this survey, our most recent community satisfaction polling was completed way back in 2013, so nearly 10 years. We hope to make community-wide surveying a more regular feature of our government going forward, and we'll come back to you seeking more funding for another survey in a couple of years. We have a city RFP opportunity, a rather significant RFP opportunity, construction manager at-risk contractor services for the Saco wastewater resource recovery facility upgrade project. The city is requesting qualification statements and a detailed proposal from general contractors to provide pre-construction and general contracting services for the Saco resource recovery project using the construction manager at-risk method of project delivery. This project will fully upgrade Saco's wastewater treatment facility on Front Street from a conventional activated sludge secondary biological treatment facility to an aerobic granular sludge treatment process with upgraded grit removal, solids handling, disinfection, and redeveloped administrative offices and garage space. The project will also raise site areas to be resilient to flooding from sea level rise. Responses to the request for qualifications will be accepted at the Finance Department at Saco City Hall, 300 Main Street, Saco, Maine, until 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday, November 14, 2022. A pre-proposal conference will be held on Monday, October 31st at 2 p.m. at the Saco Wastewater Treatment Recovery Facility at 68 Front Street. Please refer to the RFQ on Saco's website for further details and submission requirements. Lastly, I just want to say thank you to everyone involved in the Pumpkin Harvest Festival this past weekend. It was a great success. It was well attended, and a particular thanks to our PD, particularly our PD leadership who were there working traffic and security. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments for City Administrator Kenrath? Okay, not seeing any. Item 12, council discussion and comment. Is there any council discussion or comment? Councilor Hatch.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just wanted to share a short text message I received from a constituent. It was quite, I found it humorous, and I thought I'd just share here with my council colleagues here. We tend to have some serious conversations, but this one made my day. I had a mother of 10-year-old identical twins who live in Ward 5, and the twins saw the political signs along the roadway, and it sparked them to engage in a little civics lesson with their mother. And twin number one asked curiously, "Mom, do you think Miss Lucy, my wife, will vote for Phil?" And Mom, seeing an opportunity to promote independent thinking in her daughter, said, "Yeah, she might if she believes in the same thing he does." To which twin number one responded, I think he will help our state. And then Mom then replied, "Honey, he won't help the state. He'll help our little part of the state. He would represent our neighborhood." To which pragmatic twin number two chimed in and said, "Oh, well, can he make the town have Halloween on Saturday?" Unfortunately, we don't have that power. So both of you, be sure you come by my house for some candy, but it is on Monday evening.
Thank you. Anyone else, anybody else with council discussion or comments? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to throw it out there that the Saco School Department has a critical need for bus drivers. I know that the admin has already mentioned this, but it's drastically approaching a point where they're actually discussing what I view as some significant potential changes during the next school board meeting that would really disrupt this transportation service. So if you have a CDL, if you don't have a CDL, the school department will provide that training. I mean, it is kind of wonky hours, but I think that if you're a retiree or perhaps a young individual fresh out of high school that's still, looking for an opportunity out there, or even a recent college graduate, somebody, I mean, it's pretty drastic at this point. So, just throwing it out there, maybe you know somebody, I would inquire with the school department. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Counselor Archer?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to request a legal update in the future about Cannabis Cured. They're posting that they'll be opening soon. This is the marijuana business on Main Street. This was the business that was approved by the planning board while the council had issued the moratorium. So it literally states Cannabis Cured, medical dispensary coming soon on their window, and I'd just like a update on what's going on with that, legal update. Thank you.
I'll have a confidential email out to the council tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion or comments? Okay, not seeing any. That takes us to item 13. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Counselor Berman? Is there a second?
Second.
Counselor Archer? Any discussion or comment? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Meeting is adjourned at 7:46, and thank you for everyone coming tonight.